Al-Jafari affirms that the success of Annan's plan depends on international commitment to it. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our news for today. The Syrian missile units concluded yesterday the military exercises carried out by the Syrian armed forces with a tactical exercise using live ammunition.
Our rocket forces concluded the military exercise of an operation carried out with live ammunition simulating real battle conditions. Our forces struck enemy targets in depth. The operation showed the high morale of the rocket forces based on complete self-confidence and the readiness of our weapons and their capacity of destroying any hostile target in the battlefield. The rockets hit their targets with great accuracy that showed a great level of combat readiness and the ability of our men to exploit the destructive capacity of their weapons. The project was attended by Major General Rajha, Deputy Commander-in-Chief, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Defense. He was accompanied by Major General Talal Mustafa Tlas and a number of high-ranking military officers. Major General Rajha expressed appreciation for these efforts and high capacity shown by our men in the various stages of the exercise. He also pointed out the importance of combat readiness and full capacity to carry out any task in defending the security and sovereignty of our homeland and preserving the dignity of our people in order to keep Syria as the throbbing heart of Arabism and the strong citadel of the Arab nation.
Foreign and Expatriates Ministry said Nawaf Al-Faris made press statements that contradict the duties of his position of defending the country's stances and issues, which demands legal and administrative accountability. The ministry pointed out in a statement today that Al-Faris had left the headquarters of the Syrian embassy in Baghdad without having obtained prior consent from the ministry according to instructions followed in the diplomatic missions. The ministry announced that Nawaf Al-Faris was dismissed of his duties according to rules and has no longer any relation with the Syrian embassy in Baghdad or with the Foreign and Expatriates Ministry. The statement noted that the Syrian embassy will continue its work as usual with accustomed efficiency in service of the interests of both people in Syria and Iraq. The UN envoy to Syria, Mr. Kofi Annan, has announced that the UN Security Council had discussed in its session yesterday the crisis in Syria and future steps and measures. He added that the Council was briefed on the outcome of his recent visit to the region and the results of the work group's meetings in Geneva. In a press conference, after presenting his report to the Council, Annan said the talks covered the implementation of the six-point plan approved by the Council, in addition to the measures that should be taken in the areas of immense violence. Annan added that discussions also dealt with ceasefire arrangements in those areas with the help of the observers. Annan said the members of the Action Group on Syria had undertaken to keep constant pressure on the various sides of the crisis to ensure the implementation of the UN Security Council's resolutions and then adopt steps for a ceasefire with a view of starting a political dialogue. On the future of the UN mission in Syria, Annan said the issue is raised at the Security Council and there is a Russian draft resolution on the table, in addition to the UN Secretary General's report on what may be done in the future, and it is up to the Security Council to decide. Asked about his discussions with President Bashar al-Assad concerning the person to be appointed as the government's negotiator with the opposition, Annan said he asked for more information about the person His Excellency had proposed.
I think, first of all, when we met here as an action group, all the members of the action group undertook to maintain sustained and effective pressure on the parties to implement the Security Council resolutions, and first of all take steps to stop the violence so that we can move on to the political dialogue. In both Iran and Iraq, the governments committed to supporting the six-point plan.
Syria's permanent representative to the UN, Dr. Bashar al-Jafari, has stressed that the success of Annan's plan depends on international commitment and honest political will to get the plan fully implemented, and the necessity of stopping and the arming and funding of the armed terrorist groups by some countries. In a press conference held in New York following a closed session by the Security Council, al-Jafari said Annan's talks in Damascus were positive and constructive. He said the Syrian side affirmed its commitment to implement the six-point plan and that several mechanisms were approved to reduce violence and restore full security across Syria. Al-Jafari pointed out that Annan's briefing during the session and the UN Secretary General's report did not refer to any need to escalate the situation, at least politically, nor did they talk about Chapter 7 or the end of the monitor's mission. However, they both stressed, Dr. Jafari added, the need to help the Syrian people and government through implementing the six-point plan in full. Al-Jafari called on those who can influence sides in Syria to exercise such influence in order to help Annan and the Syrian government implement the plan. He warned that without putting an end to the funding and arming of the armed groups, it would be difficult for Annan's plan to succeed with a single commitment of the Syrian government only to the plan.
In his briefing to the Council today, the Special Envoy, as well as the Secretary General before him in his report submitted to the Council, both of them did not refer to any necessity of escalating the situation, at least politically speaking, within the Council. Neither the Secretary General nor the Special Envoy mentioned any reference to Chapter 7.
Russia's deputy representative to the UN, Alexander Pankin, has declared that his country had submitted a draft resolution that did not include any reference to Chapter 7. He added that any resolutions that involve this would be incorrect in the situation in Syria. He referred to the need to put pressure on all sides of the crisis. He pointed out that the Security Council's resolutions must be applied and political pressure must be used equally on all sides, adding that unfortunately there were sides constituting the third party in the crisis and who perpetrated acts of killing against civilians and the military and who were unreachable. Pankin reiterated Moscow's stand regarding the need to stop the influx of weapons across borders into Syria. He added that those who attempted to foil the observers' work did not want a peaceful solution, nor did they believe in political work. On the meetings held in Moscow with the opposition, Pankin said most of the Syrian opposition had admitted inability to control the armed groups on the ground, and that this was unacceptable. He affirmed the need to handle the arming anarchy through legal means. Director of the Russian Strategy and Technology Analysis Center, Islam Bokhov, has announced that the Turkish Army General Staff's admission that no traces of explosives were found in the ruins of the Turkish F-4 aircraft that was removed from the Mediterranean proves that the aircraft was shot down over Syrian territories by anti-craft artillery, and that this could not have happened except over Syrian territories, as the anti-aircraft artillery has only a short-range capacity. Bokhov added that for this reason, there were reports in the Turkish news media about the possibility of a mistake committed by the captain of the plane or the occurrence of some technical malfunctioning. Ankara had previously insisted that the aircraft was shot down by anti-aircraft missiles over international waters. Authorities today clashed with a number of terrorists on board two boats in Qittina Lake and Homs province that were transferring weapons and ammunition to terrorist groups in the village of Al-Qsir in province's countryside. A source in the province told Sana reporter that the authorities destroyed the two boats completely and killed all the terrorists on board. In Daraa, law enforcement members clashed with an armed terrorist group which blocked the highway in Khabab village for stealing passengers' cars. An official source in the province said that 3 members of the terrorist group were killed as the other members were arrested. In Latakia province, the authorities hunted an armed terrorist group in the Rabi'a town in Latakia countryside, causing big losses to the terrorists. An official source in the province told Sana reporter that a number of the terrorists fled to the Turkish borders, pointing out that the authorities confiscated amounts of weapons and ammunition from the terrorists. Terrorist gangs murdered 14 soldiers from the Palestinian Liberation Army who were earlier kidnapped when they were on vacation from their training institute in Masyaf, going to their homes and the 2 refugee camps in Aleppo. The forces of the Palestinian National Alliance asserted that the targeting of Palestinians by gangs working the Zionist Mossad was a plot to murder the Palestinian right of repatriation. Finally, 1 Palestinian was killed and 2 others wounded following Israeli shelling of Gaza Strip. The martyr and the 2 wounded citizens were hit by mortar shells in Shujaiya neighborhood at dawn today, east of Gaza. A number of Israeli vehicles and bulldozers broke into the area as Israeli tanks opened fire at random and Israeli warplanes flew overhead. With this, we conclude our news bulletin for today. For more information about Syria and the region, you can visit our website in English, syriaonline.sy. Up next, the latest business and market news with Khalid after the break.
The Deputy Prime Minister for Economic Affairs and the Minister of Consumer Protection has made a surprise visit to the gas distribution centers in Damascus this morning, where he detected a number of attempts to manipulate the distribution, and he took a decision to punish the sides or the parties that were responsible. He also called for listening to the complaints of the citizens, and he announced that a committee will be formed to monitor the distribution of the gas. The Minister of Petroleum gave directives to the fuel companies or the fuel committees to supply the industrial establishments with their full shares of fuel. This is so the establishments can remain operational and keep their workforce. The minister also asked the concerned authorities to make sure that the fuel is actually being used in the factories. It is to be noted that the plants in the factories that use more than 15,000 liters per month can open accounts with the company and get the fuel directly, which is easier, and many industrialists welcomed the idea. The weekly dealings at the Damascus Securities Exchange exceeded 100,000 stocks worth over 11 million Syrian pounds, as the DWX index closed 8 points higher. The International Islamic Bank was at the top of the list, with more than 61,000 stocks traded over 78 deals, followed by the International Bank for Commerce and Funding. The amount of wheat that was marketed to the cereal establishment in El Hasake exceeded 700,000 tons. The branch director at El Hasake announced that 14.5 billion Syrian pounds were transferred to the Agricultural Bank to be paid to the farmers for wheat, adding that the wheat is being delivered to the mills. Oil fell in New York on concerns that the global demand may fall after South Korea unexpectedly cut the interest rates. Australia's jobless rate went up, and some economists said that the European Union manufacturing was down last month. The U.S. stocks were up in the final hours of trading as the investors still hope that the Federal Reserve will make more stimulus moves. The European stocks, on the other hand, declined after the Federal Reserve failed to signal more measures to spur the growth. The Japanese stocks are also down for a 6th day, with the Nikkei index extending its longest losing streak since April.